for those that will be joining us by looking at this recording, I think it is saved, right, Marsha, where people can retrieve it?
Yes, everybody will be able to view it on our YouTube channel either later tonight or tomorrow sometime.
Awesome. So we welcome everybody. Welcome Elizabeth, Helen. Welcome Marsha. Thank you so much for being here. I am excited to start this conversation, this town hall meeting. It is on the topic of leadership. But before I start, we have some housekeeping stuff that we would like to remind you of. First of all, the event is being recorded, and we kindly ask that you stay mute so that we can avoid any interruption because of background noise. Again, I would like to introduce Helen McCarthy. And Helen McCarthy is the Vice President of the International Nanny Association. Am I saying that correctly, Helen?
Not till August.
Not till August, thank you. And
Marsha,
second
Vice President.
Second Vice President, and Marsha is the INA Executive Director. We are excited to have you here. I am Alene Mathurin, and I am a proud board member at the International Nanny Association. I serve in that capacity. But what I love to do at the INA is really that call to action for us to come together as one big community, for us to continue to grow, continue to provoke ideas and thoughts and conversation. And also at the INA, I am tasked with, especially because this is my first year, and one of the things that I will be working very closely on is initiatives that can help nannies save with businesses that nannies perhaps may find very interesting. So I will be telling you more about that because I will be working tirelessly to ensure that this is done. So I thank you again for being here. I think Margaret is just joining us, and we are excited to start the conversation. But before we start on the topic of leadership, it is a hot button topic. It is a topic that I think is very poignant. Let me first allow Marsha to share with us what's happening at the INA.
Sure, thank you so much, Alene. We actually have a lot going on in the month of May and some exciting things as we move into summer. So I'm just going to share this with you guys real quick. Couple things we just announced today, our Be Well project. So the month of June for the INA will be Wellness Month. And we are inviting our members, other people in the community, you do not have to be an INA member to submit something, to create a short video or maybe a blog post, something telling us what you do to stay well, to be well, whether it's physical wellness, emotional, spiritual, anything that you do to stay healthy in your mind and your soul and your body. We invite you to share that with us. And the hope is that we're all kind of in the middle of, we're not sure if we're coming out of the pandemic or what we're doing. We're all sort of like in this waiting mode, but we all know that we all need to be well. It's taken a toll on all of us. And we feel like right now is a good time to talk about wellness. So we encourage you to do that. I'll be sharing links in the chat bar, as well as if you're watching this after on the YouTube channel, they'll be in the YouTube description. So if you let us know, will be a link to submit the video and a different link to submit a blog post. Our deadline to get those in is May 31st so that we can spread them out throughout the month of June. And then we have another webinar coming up, which is really exciting, anxiety in children. I'll put the link on there so you can look for more of it. It is free for INA members. This is a professional webinar series, which means that non-members, we ask that you pay $25 and you can reach out to the office on how to do that, but all INA members get this webinar for free. Most of our webinars are free for everyone, but because with our professional webinar series, we do pay the speaker for this. That is a member benefit, but we ask that non-members contribute something to that. So we've got an exciting time coming up in May. is our awards ceremony. We usually do our awards at conference, but as everyone knows, we did not have an in-person conference this year. So we will be giving out our service award pins, our Meritorious Service Award, and our Nanny of the Year, Saturday, May 22nd at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be on Zoom, but it will be shown on Facebook Live, so you can interact with us on that. So we're really excited about getting all that stuff together. Helen knows well we're getting all the information we need to put out there. So another exciting thing that we've started this year that we've got some events coming up for our chapters. March, we had our first chapter meetings, which this year are totally virtual and open to not just INA members, but everyone. Our Minnesota chapter meeting is set for Saturday, May 22nd at 1 o'clock Eastern. That should say PM Eastern. It's not 1 a.m. in the morning. And the link for that is ready to go. But we also have our Ohio chapter meeting and our New York chapter meetings that are being scheduled. They've been scheduled, but they're not available for registration yet. Dates are forthcoming for the second quarter for the Los Angeles, the Mexico, and the Australia chapters as well. So you can look for details in June for those as well. If you didn't get a chance to see this, we had some exciting things happen earlier this spring where we had been working, Emily in the exam committee has been working tireless over the last year to get our Nanny Basic Skills Assessment translated into 15 new languages, which means you can now take it in a total of 17 different languages. So I will put a link on the chat and in the description as well if you want to check that out. Very exciting. They're going to be starting to work on the credential exam, I'm told, in the next few months as well. So that's very exciting. And then we just introduced the board of directors for the 2021-2022 year. Many familiar faces on here that are continuing their 2-year term, and 4 new faces. We're really excited. They will be installed into the board officially August 1st. Right now, our new board members are transitioning and training and learning the ropes and that kind of stuff. And our 2 board members that are stepping down, Rachel Lubin and Kristen Nader, are training them and working on exiting. So that's all happening this summer. And then I have one more tiny little exciting thing that's happening that we're actually introducing on Thursday. I can't give you a whole lot of detail, but we are working on a website refresh. If anybody's tried to look through our website, you all know that it is cumbersome. It's been about 6 years since we've redone it, so it's time for a fresh look. But more than that, we need it to be a little bit more user-friendly and able to find things. So we're working on that, and we have some exciting details on that project that we're announcing on Thursday. That's all I have for you. I hope that you, if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me in the INA office at info@nanny.org. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Also, if you have questions in the chat, you can go ahead and chat, ask them there too. So thanks, Alene.
Wow, that was a lot. That is a lot. It's exciting, the things that are happening at the INA. One of the things, in fact, I like all of it, but most importantly, that Be Well campaign is such a fabulous campaign. And I think, nannies should take it and run with it. The fact that we can say, how do we keep well emotionally? How do we keep well mentally? Such an important topic. And again, very timely. We're coming out of a pandemic. We've been stuck in a house for a very long time. And how are we keeping sane? I think is such a beautiful, beautiful initiative. So Julia, I want to recognize you. I want to recognize Marlene, Isaac, Margaret. Thank you for being here. And again, for those of you that will be watching on YouTube, thank you so much for being here. Elizabeth, again, thank you. The topic is leadership, but before I really delve into the topic, for those of you that do not know me, I am Alene Mathurin. I serve again at the INA, board director. I also have worked for the past 12 years in the nanny community. First, very grassroots. For those of you that are in the tri-state, I think you will notice my face going from park to park. And initially, it started from a love for nannies, just absolute love for nannies and challenging nannies to the idea of what is the highest, truest ideals of being a nanny. So that was what we started in parks, in playgrounds, in enrichment classes all over New York. And then we established My Nanny Circle, took it from the grassroots into an online presence. And for the past 11 years, we've been doing a lot of things. But the most important thing that I think we've been doing, and I've been doing in the nanny community, is bridging the gap, offering that bridge, saying that we are one big community. The idea that whatever you do, if it's nannying, do it to the best of your ability. And if you want to do something more, the idea that it's there, go find it, go where your soul takes you. It's something that I have ushered in. And so I will continue to serve in the nanny community. And I am excited to do that. Of course, I will mention, I started the ball 6 years ago. And for so many of you, I think one point we had 790 of you at a ball. For those of you that have been so good to us over the years, so good to the ideas and the events that we've created, the walks that we've done through Central Park to recognize breast cancer, to all of you, I continue to say thank you so much. So let's delve into the topic. I love it. I'm excited about it. What is leadership? And again, for everybody that's here, it is very interactive. I want to learn from you. I think it makes sense to start. What is your idea of leadership? Anybody wants to start? Julia, you're about to say something. No? I can tell you, when I think of leadership, I think of a mothership. So you paint the picture that there are ships on an ocean, and there's one that is leading. It's that mothership. I think of that. What do you think about when you think about leadership?
I was going to say, I think of a model, a role model, somebody that I think of leadership. It should be somebody that you want to follow to do something. You see them doing something good, something that you want to replicate or learn from, and you follow them. That's kind of what I think of when I think of leadership.
I love that. So it's the idea that, again, when we paint scenes, the next scene that I'll be painting, that I am on a trail and there is somebody leading, a tour guide, and we're doing it together, but there's just the leader that directs. Do you agree? Now, the other thing that I will posit to you is that some of the greatest leaders started in the back seats of businesses, organizations, movements, churches, communities. They push strollers in cities all over. They care for children in the day and in the night. These are leaders. Do you think this might be correct, that some of the greatest leaders started from the grounds, from the bottom to the top? Do you think that's a fair statement?
Completely. I think you start from the bottom and you work your way up. I think leadership, if you're in the position of leadership, you lead by example. Mm-hmm. Especially when you are in a higher position and somebody sticks you on that pedestal, they like to knock you off it. Mm-hmm. And everybody does like to have a go at you occasionally and knock mm-hmm. you off your little pedestal. But if you lead by example, I think also when you're in a position of leadership, you have to watch what you do. Mm-hmm. And because we all know what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and what happens on Facebook definitely stays on Facebook.
I love that. I really do. So the fact that you are a role model, that all eyes are on you, that you're mindful about actions. I hear that, and I really, really love that. The other question, and I'm just going to just be throwing questions out there just for the sake of stirring a conversation. Are leaders born or are they made? Anybody wants to jump in on that?
I think they're made. I think you can make a leader, but I think that some people are born with some natural abilities. I don't know, maybe abilities isn't the right word, but natural tendency towards gathering groups. And you know what I mean? That part of leadership that makes people want to follow them. You can be a good role model and not be a leader. I think you can be doing the right things and not have people following you. And I think there is something, I mean, I definitely think that you can grow into leadership and you can learn as you go and as you make mistakes in that. But I do think there's something, I mean, I see it in children all the time, right? Like sometimes I'll look at, a group of kids and I'll think, man, that one right there. So it has some kind of natural ability to gather people together, to get them to do what you want them to do, for better or worse sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's not great, but I think there is something, there's something, I don't know if it's born is the right word exactly, but there's something inherent in how they were, maybe it's raised when they were young, maybe the models that they had growing up, young, really, really young, but there's something there at the core that doesn't exist for everybody.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And before I continue, welcome, Sue Downey. Thank you so much. We're on the topic of leadership. The idea, are leaders born or are they made? I believe it's a little of both. Marsha, you're so correct. There's some children, you see them and you're like, okay, I can imagine you 10, 20 years down the line in a boardroom. I see that. So there is something innate. There is that propensity to take action and what have you. But I think even the pandemic is teaching us that leaders are sometimes made, perhaps a call to action. In great tragedies, we begin to see leaders emerging because there is perhaps a call to action, because perhaps the hearts of people are probed. So I think it's like you said, a little bit of both. So do you want to add anything to that idea of whether they're made or are they born that way?
Elizabeth also said something real quick. I just want to make sure you see that.
What did Elizabeth say in the chat? I believe this parallels with the nature versus nurture argument. It's both. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is both. And I don't know if you guys can see this when you take care of kids, but there are people in this world that have a natural charisma and they're like born with it. And I've seen, like, even within a family, there's like a kid who just naturally everybody wants to be around. And when you have those kids, the responsibility is so much greater to give them the skills to use that natural talent in a way that's for good. Because we've seen, what's happened if you look at certain politicians who have that charisma, but they don't have the leadership skills to necessarily, or the ethics or all the stuff to like go the direction that you would think is good, whatever your good is. But yeah, I think it's both. And I think there's different kinds of leaders, like what you were saying, Alene, like it's important to remember that it's not always just the person who is standing up giving the speech. Sometimes it's the person who shows up all the time, or sometimes it's the person who does all the work but never gets the spotlight. Like there's different kinds of leaders. And so just like that's something that recently I've been thinking about a lot as we go through all of this, because you might not be normally a leader, but maybe in a time of extreme stress or in the right situation, you rise to that occasion because you're exactly what everybody needs in that moment.
Yeah, very, very, very well said, Sue. And I love Elizabeth's idea, Darwin's theory of nature versus nurture. Some children naturally, because of the environment that they're born into, they're nurtured that way. They begin to see leadership qualities and they develop it because it's environmental, which is what Elizabeth is saying. And then again, like Marcia and Sue were saying, some people just have that innate propensity. You begin to see it very early. And it's a question of looking at it and nurturing some of those qualities we see in very young children. So that is, I think that is so supportive of what we're saying. And earlier on, I used the idea of leadership in terms of a mothership. But one of the things that I wrote here is that although a mothership is in the front, it relies on the collective support and the feedback of all the ordership that's in the journey. So let's talk about that, the understanding that the frontal position or that gives rise to leadership does not negate the people in the back. So I think it's a great thing that you were saying, Sue, that they're quiet leaders that might be in the back supporting the person in the front. So any ideas of that on that as well? Maybe I'm going to rephrase that. Do leaders always in a frontal position, the ones that are always seen?
No.
But people assume that, right?
True.
So I can tell you, for example, at my Nanny Circle, we do a lot of collective work. And one of the things that I always wanted to do is to help create other leaders. And we see it at the INA as well. How do you give people, task them with stuff to help cultivate other leaders based on their skills? So I don't think that leaders are always the people in the front. Of course, there are people that are assigned that leadership title, but I think some of the greatest leaders are those that provide support, almost like an anchor to those in the front. Make sense? Anybody disagree with that?
Agree.
No, I agree. I think that that's very true. I think that sometimes great leaders, lead from the middle, or, lead from even the back. I think I saw like there's some story out there about how like wolf packs, how they roam about, and the leader of the wolf pack actually brings up the rear because they don't want to ever let anyone be left behind. And I thought that was really powerful because in some ways you really need to do that, because it's really easy when you're leading something to be all about like, let's go, where we're going, what our goals are, how we want to get there, all that kind of stuff. But you got to remember that not everybody's getting there at the same time. And you got to always be aware of where people are in the journey. And I thought that was really powerful when I saw that. I love wolves personally, are one of my favorite animals. So like, that's really powerful to me, like that bringing up the rear, you know what I mean? Bringing up the back and making sure that the weakest and the oldest among us are not lost to somebody. So.
And I think that's powerful is because it's having this knack, this eye for seeing, even if you're in the front, not just looking in a frontal position, but looking backwards and being able to identify, and the analogy of that wolf pack, saying that we want to make sure that all of us stay together. I think that is such a great quality of a leader, that cohesive unit that come together for a common purpose or a shared vision. I think that is perhaps a powerful statement about a leader. Anybody else to add anything before we move on? The next thing that we want to talk about is, I'm going to give you a second to think about the best leaders that you've ever known and what makes them so great when you think of them as leaders, and what do you think they do and some of the things that they don't do. Can anybody think of like somebody a great leader, somebody that leads, and what do they do that you think that's powerful, and what do they not do? And what makes them that great? let me just tell you, when I think of a great,
All right,
go ahead, Marcia.
I didn't
No,
want to
no.
be the only one to chime in, but I think that a great leader doesn't belittle, doesn't make you feel less than just because you aren't leading, because that's not your place in the community. And the reverse of that is that a good leader like makes you feel like you are part of something bigger, you know, finds your gifts and skills and helps you discover how to use them to help the community in some way. So it's kind of the reverse, same thing on both sides.
I love that. I love that. When I think of a great leader, I sometimes, without any bias, think of my own grandfather. We lived in an agrarian society, and so they depended on, the agriculture and all of that, and how he was able to quickly mobilize people around the idea of giving and sharing, and that barter system. And perhaps one gives fruits and vegetable while the other one helps with, carpentry and what have you. So it was always a mission beyond self. It was altruistic. It was a shared vision and goal. And it was to make the lives of everybody and not just the leader because perhaps he rang the church bell, but it was a community effort for the good of all people. So when sometimes I think about his work, I think of that type of leadership. And it was a very humble leadership, because this is not a man that was well versed and well educated in terms of academia and what have you, but how they were able to use what they have and make the best of it for all people. So that's how I think of leadership. I think Julia wants to add on to something.
Well, I think a great leader is somebody that teaches somebody else what they know. I mean, not all the knowledge, but give them inspiration, guide them along the way. And when that person get to a certain place in whatever position that great leader is doing, then he pass on the baton, so you can trust that person to do the work he was doing before or she was doing before, and that's how you learn. And that person now pass that baton on when he gets older or she gets older, pass the baton on to somebody else, So I look at it that way, so that everybody learn and share, and then whatever business you invest in, that you can leave that legacy to somebody coming up after you.
Thank you, Julia. I love that. So the keywords I took here: passing on that baton, almost that race, that I'm going to hand you the baton. It's yours. I'm holding it for you. I'm there. We're in it together. I hear that, Julia, that passing on the baton construct. I really like that. Anybody else wants to add anything to that? Sue?
Yeah, I had a professor in college. Well, he was like I did like this, I joined everything because that's me. And I was on this board, and he was our like advisor / professor. And he was the first person, I think, who lived like openly gay. Like this was, 35 years ago or whatever. It was a long time ago. And he like stood for things. And one thing that I always thought, there were two things about him that were amazing to me. He stood for things, and he like would, almost to preach or inspire us to believe what he believed about living our life and whatever, and all people are equal and just beautiful. But he also like backed it up. Like he didn't just say things, he did the work, and he showed up for the things, and he treated everybody in a way that was respect. Like a great leader has to not just say the right things, but they have to back it up with their actions. And I try to do that as much as I can when I am in that role. And the other thing that was so inspiring to me was that I feel like a great leader also gives the credit make sure that everybody gets the credit, because like what you were talking about before, Alene, is so true. Like, you can't be a leader if you don't have people supporting you, or the people in the group following you or doing the work. And so a great leader doesn't seek out the attention or the credit for what's happening. Instead, they spread it around to all the people that are, making things happen. So that those two things really have inspired me from watching what he was like.
Awesome. I really like those shared ideas, Sue. I hear you say your professor was very authentic. He believed in what he believed in. And most importantly, leadership is not just in saying, but it's actually in doing. Let your work speak for itself. I absolutely like that. And I think what I would love nannies to take away, we should take away, is that we are all leaders within our own life's constructs. And in the context of the nanny community, leadership, like I said, really unfolds while you're pushing the stroller and changing the diaper, because you're leading perhaps in the absence of that family, you were the one leading. Mm-hmm. So it is important that sometimes we take for granted the magnitude of our leadership skills and the magnitude of what we do in terms of leaders. And I think the takeaway is to not negate your small beginnings as leaders, because Helen, I think you said it earlier, it really starts sometimes from all the way down, and it begins to grow almost like this hierarchical system. Sometimes it happens that way. And some of the best leaders, I think, start from the ground up. So that is very important. I love that conversation because it just makes it makes all of us, I think. I think the next thing that we need to think about is leadership in terms of growth, because I think I hear a lot of people ask the question, am I a leader overnight? Can I just become a leader tomorrow? So let's talk about that. Leadership in terms of growth cycles. Anybody wants to share ideas about that? The idea is it's a step-by-step process.
You've got to have a following before you can be a leader within the industry. You sort of need to be in a group. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today, and she's going to be embarrassed about this, without Sue. Because I came over, I'd lived in America, and I never heard of Nanny Palooza. I'd never even heard of the INA, and I lived in the States, in Florida, for 3 years. And then on Facebook, it popped up, and I thought, oh, what's this? Nanny conference, let's go to it. And that's when I first met Sue, and that was like 2014. And I certainly wouldn't be sitting here without her. So she's a great leader, and and now we're about to be the co-presidents as of August of the INA, and who would have thought that all those years ago? But I do think you need the strong backing when you start rising above to be a leader. You definitely need the people behind you, and you learn lessons, and who are the good people, and who the ones who aren't, and that. So you do get pushed, and sometimes those who are very quiet are the ones who do need to sort of be just led slightly to come forward.
I hear you, Helen. Thank you for that. I do believe that it's a step-by-step process. And the reason why I love the step-by-step process, it's almost like it starts from the infancy. So there is that innate propensity to do things that are big, perhaps to be able to move people, perhaps it's to be able to care in a very altruistic way. And I believe leadership must be a step-by-step process, because this infancy into maturity allows you that space for you to grow and allows you that space to make a lot of mistakes. And I can see it in my own life, depending on what I do, that the person that I was perhaps 10 years ago, I'm different now. And it's because of, like Helen is saying, because I'm learning from my peers, I'm learning from individuals, I'm making mistakes, and we're going to talk about that. We are making a lot, sometimes leaders make a lot of mistakes. And the good thing about it is to recognize it and to make meaningful changes. Again, not for your good, but for the good of all people. So I believe that it's a step-by-step process, and that process requires a lot of patience, because you will experience a lot of things along the way. And I think, Helen, you began to talk about that. You'll be challenged. You'll have sleepless nights sometimes. You'll have the days that you cry, and the days that you are triumphant, and the days that you say, oh my goodness, did I actually do that? And these are all the things together, almost like that big melting pot, that will either make you or completely break you. So within that space of time, for those of you that are going to be joining us, and those of you that are listening, be very patient and be very mindful not to abort your mission, because it all comes with that territory. And I see you smiling, Sue, because I think you might have experienced that also.
Yes, that is so true.
Yeah. Anybody want to add anything to that phase, step-by-step process?
No, but can I say Julia's name? Because I love to. Julia Lefos. Okay, thank you. It's my favorite thing. I love anytime she's there, I like just to say her name because it's such a great name.
Awesome. So I think on this topic, idea, the takeaway is be willing to grow psychologically, mentally, and physically based on the growth level, where you are in your leadership, in your leadership journey. Be patient with that process. I dare say that although again, you have innate qualities to be a leader, the idea of leading may not be just an overnight thing. And I think great leaders take time to learn. I think that step-by-step process is really a learning process. I think it's the Native American Indians that say that the teacher is going to come when the students are ready. So think of the student as the leader, and think of the teacher as the community. For example, the nanny community. What can you learn at the INA? What can you learn from other nannies? What can you learn at Nanny Palooza? What can you learn at the INA conferences? These are all the teachers that's going to tap into what you have innately, and together can catapult you into future endeavors as a leader. I think that's very important. Anybody else wants to add anything before we go on to another idea?
One thing, I don't know if it really fits in here, but it just kind of came as you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite traits of leadership is like that humility. Almost like my favorite leaders are people who like don't even know the following that they have sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like don't really realize the effects their words have on different people, or how many people are really behind them. And I think that comes from a humble, like, I'm just doing what I need to do because, you know what I mean, putting one foot in front of the other kind of thing. I don't know if it fits in here, but I felt like that was just something that came up as you were speaking. Like that trait of humility is really kind of rare in leadership when you see it. And it's nice to see it when you find it. It makes me, maybe not everybody, but it makes me want to follow more people, more when they don't know when they don't know how good of a leader they are. And maybe that's not the right way to say it, but when they don't know like how, I don't know how to say it except other than
their level of impact.
Yeah, the level of impact that they have. I mean, it just like they're just trying to do the right thing. They're just trying to do what's right to them. And that to me is such a huge aspect of leadership. And it's not all in every leader, it's not even in every good leader, but it's something that I like to follow.
I really like that, Marsha. A good leader operates from humility, you're saying, and sometimes they're oblivious to the idea of their impact.
I mean, maybe not completely oblivious, but like don't let it go to their heads.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Somehow and I think the only way that can happen, that they don't let it go to their heads, is if there is like an unawareness that their impact is as great as it is. Because I think it's kind of human nature to, as soon as you realize people think you're doing a good job, to let it go to your head. I think it's just as human nature. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I think it's human nature to just like, when you recognize that, somehow let that seek in. But I think that a good leader somehow does not necessarily realize how good of a leader they are.
And I think that was once said about Mother Teresa. Some people speak about that in context to Martin Luther King. It's not like you're saying they're not aware of the impact that they have on people, but they are not fueled by the collective admiration.
I like
and voices.
that. That's a really great way to say it. They're not fueled by it. That's not why they do it.
Yes.
It's really, really easy. And I think it's a trait of human nature to, as soon as you get that, like that kudos, to find fuel from that. I like the way you said that, to get to want to do more of it so that you get that. But I think a good leader doesn't, somehow there's a disconnect, and they don't let that be their fuel. They don't let that be their reason.
And I think that's really great, because that brings the question of intrinsic versus extrinsic leadership. Intrinsic leadership begins to say that I am moved by, a common and shared vision, that altruistic approach, not being fueled by, by admiration. And the extrinsic leadership is fueled by personal gains and perhaps payments and admiration and what have you. So I think it brings, that very interesting type of leadership. Is it, are those qualities intrinsic? Are they extrinsic? And I hear you when you say that a good leader should be able to operate from intrinsic motives for the common good of all people. And I think it brings us into the next thing that I want to talk about, is the idea that leaders, should leaders be thinking prospectively or retrospectively? And let me just break this down. I think sometimes as a good leader should be thinking about things, planning ahead, but also looking behind to see mistakes, failures, successes that has happened. And all of this can be used as a guide to moving forward. I know in my own life, sometimes when I sit down and think about what next, I always look at the rearview mirror, meaning retrospectively. And I also look at what's happening on the ground and begin to think about it prospectively. So any idea about that in terms, because a good leader has a good eye for something. Would you agree? And the agreement that I'm looking for conversation about, should that leader be thinking in a very holistic way, or should that be leader thinking, just one way? Any ideas? One thing I can tell you, sorry,
when you
Helen.
hold a position of leadership, you have to be open to all aspects. You might be that you're focused on one way, but you need to listen to everybody.
I think so.
Agreed.
Well, and I think that there are times when you need a leader to be solely focused on just one thing and being very driven if there's a specific problem or something. But if you're leading a group for a long time, or if you're doing organizational work or team building, it's important to look at it more holistically, I think. So it's like a lot of things with leadership. It's sort of dependent, for at least the way I look at it. It might be dependent on the situation that you're in.
I like that. I think, Margaret, you want to add something as well, Marlene?
I was just saying, you have to be able to be a fair person, to hear the good and the bad in and always be fair and to balance out everything. Like you can't just take one side. You always have to be fair with whatsoever other people's opinion. You have to be fair. That is good too. Whenever you're a leader, you have to be able to be in that way that if anybody say anything to you, to able to be listening, and understand without being, I am the boss. You have to listen to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that because it brings us to our next idea that you're saying a great leader listens and a great leader is fair. So the next thing that we're talking about, our leaders are what are the greatest lessons you've learned from good leaders or from good leadership? What are the greatest lessons you've learned from them? Julia?
Honesty.
Honesty?
Yeah. And what I learned from a good leader is that under pressure, they know how to stand firm,
Mhm.
know how to discipline in the right way,
Mhm.
you know, and because being a leader, you have the burden. The burden is on you.
That's
Anything that happens, the burden is on you. But you have to be able to stand firm and say the right thing at the right time, and don't bring down other people behind. Even though you're up there, you have people under you, you have to be able to have respect for the persons that's underneath you. So I think honesty and patience, and being firm in an honest and loving way.
yes.
Thank you, Julia. I love that. And Elizabeth is saying patience. Good leaders take all sides into account and don't make snap decisions. She says something I struggle with. Um, thank you for adding that on.
Well,
But I would almost add to that too. Sometimes a leader needs to make a bit of a snap decision, and they have the ability to do that with calm. Does that make sense? So like there are
Yes.
times in leadership that you do have to you gotta make a call and you gotta just decide. And you have to, a good leader will take a breath and not be, it may be something that needs to happen quickly, but not go on somebody else's timetable just because they want a decision, but know that you're going to take a second, you're going to look at the facts and then make a decision calmly without a lot of emotion in it. Which
I
is
love
hard
that.
to do in a lot of situations. It's hard to take emotion out of it.
I love that. Sometimes in the past, I had to make really snap decisions. And one of the things that I thought of immediately that I used to tell nannies, I say to nannies, begin to think about how we can develop our own SWOT analysis, even as nannies, and look at the situation and begin to think what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, really begin to think about it. And when you're able to do that, then you have a clearer direction as to where to go. And for those of you that are here, those of you that are continuing your leadership journey, those of you that are thinking, now is my time to perhaps step up in the nanny community and become bigger leaders. One of the things that I caution everyone, even outside the nanny community, is be careful what you ask for. Just a little bit of humor in there. It comes sometimes with sleepless nights, with headaches and pains and physical pains and emotional pains and psychological pains. It comes, like Julia says, not being able to take grudges and take things personally. That is something that I suffered with for a long, long time, because I always wanted to fight back, and I had to realize you sit back and you maintain cool, and perhaps even in challenges, you ask yourself, what are the teachable moments? What can I learn from that? How can I become a better me instead of throwing the punches? So I always say to leaders and to those of you that are going to be joining us on YouTube and looking at this later, is that recognize that in the journey of leadership, There are going to be stumbling blocks. There will be hurdles to go over. There are going to be some incredible wins and some incredible downfalls. But at the end of the day, if it's moved, if your leadership qualities and style and all of that is moved by altruistic missions, you will survive. So be patient with yourself and be kind to yourself while you lead. Anything else that we want to add to this conversation? Because I want to ask you, the other thing that I want to ask you, because we are pretty much short on time, why we're talking about that some of us, Elizabeth says nature versus nurture argument, and we agreed with that. We said that some people have that innate propensity that we begin to see it even as we're changing the diaper, that I want to grab this, I want to hold this is mine. We begin to see it in the toddlers. We begin to see it in the Sudanis that does these incredible things. And Marsha, I asked, how do you do this? And Helen, and all of you, even Julia, the idea that leadership is one of the greatest qualities of a leader is to be able to be supportive to the person in the front, to say, I've got your back, brother, or I've got your back, sister. And Margaret always been there. So there are so many different attributes of great leaders. So the question is, why are some people not taking it to the next level?
Scared, responsibility.
Fear. I love that. The I'm not good enough syndrome. Me.
Could be, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be in charge of these people.
And you know what's so interesting is that, like, I think that leadership has changed too a little bit with social media, because when you're putting yourself out there, there are going to be people who don't like you, or don't like your decisions, don't like what you're doing, whatever. And if you are old like me, you're used to that. That's been like, you know, since I was a Sunday school teacher, right? Like, it just you go through this. But now I think with social media and the immediacy and the vitriol of the way that we live right now, it's hard, because even leaders who mostly are revered, there's always a dark, or like when somebody doesn't agree with you, it turns personal and mean. And I wish it didn't happen, but I think that it does scare people off from sort of taking that next step, because especially for nannies, we all are peacemakers, we are all nurturers. We want everybody to be happy, we don't want anyone to be mad at us, we don't want anyone to be upset. And so, you know, that's a hard thing. You were asking the great leader, and I'm telling you, I think one of the best lessons that I've learned from a leader ever is Michelle Obama's, when they go low, you go high. Like, I constantly refer to that in my head, and when I talk to other leaders who are, you know, oh, they're attacking me, well, you just have to go high every time, but it's not easy.
And I love that you mentioned that leadership, because of technological innovations, have caused a almost like a paradigm shift in leadership, and especially because of the pandemic. And for example, in the groups and how bitter people can be, and how easy it is to project depending on how people are feeling at a given time. And I had to make a very conscious decision almost half a year ago to take a break from social media, because I realized that it was not good for my mental health, and I had to step back a little. And I think that's the thing, knowing when to go in and knowing when to step back, because great leaders, I think, also need to do sometimes what we forget to do, which is self-care. And that's very, very important. Anybody else wants to add to why some people decide not to pursue greater leadership opportunities?
I guess they don't want to take on the burden, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are paralyzed, I think. I once heard a man say, it's not what people think about you that matters, but rather what you think about yourself. Actually, it was my post today. A constant reminder for leaders to be very anchored in the idea of who I am, because very quickly people can assign very comfortably ideas to you without even knowing you, and using maybe a small chapter or context in your life to create a total idea of who you are. And that is a very dangerous thing. So one of the things I always say in leadership, having a strong idea of my I am, who I am, being grounded in that is going to help safeguard you when the attacks come, because with leadership, it really does come with the good, the bad, and the very, very bad, and the very, very good, and the very, very ugly. And so that wholesome idea that I am Elizabeth, and this is, you know, these are my ideals. And no matter what's attached to me, that I'm grounded in that ultimate truth. I think we must always carry this and be aware of it. Anybody else wants to add anything to that?
I think being honest. I mean, you know, they say if you want to be a politician, you can't be honest. Politicians aren't honest, doesn't matter what country you're through. But I think honesty is the best thing. And as you said, everybody has a perception of who you are, where you've come from, what your lifestyle is, and this and that. And I think sometimes people get shocked when you actually tell them your story. I mean, I get perceived as this white British top nanny, and it's like, I came from really humble beginnings. I grew up on a council estate. I grew up as my mum brought me up as a single parent because my parents got divorced when I was 3. But people don't know that side of me. And it's one of those things, and they just think you're this entitled person because I live in London occasionally, you know, and I fly around the world, but that's for my work. And I didn't. First time I went abroad was with my husband 25 years ago. That was the first time I'd stepped on a what I call a big aeroplane, and we went to Florida on holiday. But I'd been on small aeroplanes, but never a big one. But people think, you know, they like to think and make these stories up about you. And I think sometimes if you're really honest and say, well, hey, this is where I began, this is sort of my quick mini life story, and you tell people that, and they're like, ooh.
Yeah, I think the response to that is the Oprah effect. The Oprah effects. Oprah says, "Oh, so you thought that? Okay, I think I've heard that. All right, if that makes you happy." And the idea that perception becomes reality for some people, and that no matter how, like in the best of my best times, when I'm really trying to be good, and I'm doing this thing because of, I know in my hearts and hearts that I'm doing it because of altruistic reasons, then somebody has another reason. And I think in concluding, one of the things that I think it's important for us to consider is knowing one's truth. I think it's Socrates that says, know thyself, because if you don't know yourself, it's very difficult to begin to lead, again, the pack with lots of different people and being able to understand the individuals. But I think in my research for this, and for something that I was doing earlier on this year about leadership, is what resonated with me is Winston Churchill's quote. He says, the nation will find it very hard to look up to leaders who are keeping their heads to the ground.
Wow.
The nation will find it very hard to look up to leaders who are keeping their ears to the ground. And it brings us back to Marsha's idea of leaders having this level of humility. And she proposes that perhaps that is not always that way, because perhaps we're living in a society that's individualistic, and perhaps we are fueled by the energies of one's admiration, of people's admiration. She said that, but he's saying that if you keep your ears to the ground, for me, I hear humility. I hear being able, that inclusiveness, staying true to one's mission, and the idea that if you're keeping your ears to the ground, you're really connected to those that you are leading, that you're hearing from them, their truths, what they think, their perceptions, you may not be able to cater to all of it, but you are staying in tuned, in harmony, loving the people that you serve. And I think it's a powerful statement by Winston Churchill. So before we formally conclude, anybody else wants to add anything else? Well, I will conclude by saying thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Sue Downey, Helen McCarthy. Again, in August, there will be co-vice presidents. Remind me, please. These are new titles. First, can somebody help me, Helen?
Co-vice presidents.
Co-vice presidents, okay. And Marsha, for the incredible work that you continue to do. I continue to usher a call for those of you that are going to be looking at this thing to join the INA. You began to hear earlier when Marsha was talking about, I think, that incredible drive about health and being connected to that and all the work that the INA is doing. You begin to see through the board the idea that the INA shares, that we are one collective spirit governed by ideas. Myself and Ruka, being Black women on the board, speaks to what we're trying to do of inclusiveness. And so I ask you to join the INA, begin to add your voice to the conversation, because you are leaders. Come lead at the INA. Perhaps it's in the initiatives and the endeavors that you're going to be taking on at the INA. You can only try. You cannot truly judge if you're not in there. So I ask you very humbly if you can consider that. And tonight we had this very fortunate time to speak about leadership. The idea that if you're pushing a stroller, no matter where you are, in London, in California, somewhere down in Brooklyn, somewhere up in West Orange, in New Jersey, that you are leading, and to not negate that humble beginning of your leadership, because it's within that phase, that infancy phase, that step-by-step guide, that journey, that you'll begin to learn stuff that's going to allow you to become the further great leader that you will become. And that leaders should be governed by altruistic motions and ideas, and that very importantly is that leaders must be able to stay in tuned with what's happening on the ground, have integrity. And lastly, my call to action is that so many of you, no matter if it's within the Nanny community or outside the Nanny community, that you want to lead, go where your soul takes you, what wakes you up, find it, no matter where that is, and lead, not only for yourself, but for others. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for sharing this space and this time with us.